The coolest people I know. We are in business, and I'm here with quite literally one of the coolest people that I know. I have known him for a number of years in a number of different capacities, but primarily because he is not only one of the coolest people I know, but also one of the smartest people I know who takes machines and makes them obey their human masters, primarily in the expression engine world and craft world and quite literally just about everything else. He's the CEO and principal of Mithra. Eric Lamb, welcome.
Thanks, Doug. Happy to be here, man.
I'm super excited to have you talk about yourself for the next half hour. I know that makes you super uncomfortable.
Oh, no, that's like my favorite topic ever. We talked a little bit about it, but I've been doing a lot of network and outreach and just trying to grow my brand a little bit more. So everybody's always very curious. So it's great. Give me a minute to talk about myself. I'm usually pretty thrilled about that.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. You've been running Mithra for how long at this point?
I think we just hit 14 years last June. So it's kind of started out as like an offshoot of contracting, is freelancing, is kind of the same thing. Like I imagine once upon a time you were Doug, and then you started your own little company, and that was Mithra for me. Was I felt like I needed a little bit more credibility, right? Of like there's only so far you can take things as Eric, but as a company, well, now that opens quite a few more doors, and it gives you a little bit more options of things, and it definitely helps with the revenue increases that we all need in 2025. But yeah, it's been about 14 years, man.
That's fantastic. To keep a company alive for that long is a feat by any means. So way to go, man. That's awesome.
Well, in disclosure, I did kind of put it on hiatus for a good 6 years in
Mm.
between there. But I kept paying my business license fees every year. I kept it current and make sure I had my domain. But yeah, I took a little hiatus there and around oh God, I can't even remember the years. It's been so long. Probably around 2017 to throw my hat into the startup ring. I thought I'd go ahead and build out a company with partners and investors and do all of that. And so I had to kind of step back from Mithra a little bit to focus on that.
Mm.
But it was very easy to pick back up and get right back into things. And thankfully, I had a decent enough reputation when I did kind of shutter things for that little period of time. Where when I came back, it was I was met with open arms. It was very very fortuitous for me to have options out of nowhere, and so yeah, no, it's been around for 14 years, but been I think at this stage we've been active again for about 5. And before that, I think we went about 9 years before the hiatus. So, or 7 years. But yeah, it's been a blast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You've been in the development world for a long time since, back in the, Windows 95 days,
Yes,
maybe not
sir.
that long. Maybe
No,
that long.
no, 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 no. It was.
Back when we were all developing in like, our MySpace profiles and trying to see what we could, do with HTML back in the day. I guess what has changed? The answer is everything. What's been your most favorite change in the development world over the past couple of years?
Um, oh geez, that's a tough one. I kind of have a few. I'm not gonna hit all of them, but I came up through the Wild West days of the internet stuff. So procedural coding was a big thing. Include once, require once, all of that craziness that we used to go through. Um,
WordPress basically still is that.
yeah, yeah, and God bless them. They're really putting in the effort, and they like the way that they do it, and they're not going to change for nobody. And agree with it or not, I respect it. So
Fair.
go nuts, and it seems to be working out great for them. Like not for nothing. If doing it wrong leads to that type of a business, then we're all
I
making.
don't want to be right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but let me see. Probably version control. See, when that started really, really catching on, as a thing that we all universally used. That was a groundswell moment for me as a developer, because it now meant, like, remember I mean, again, Wild West, right? So like we would edit files on a production server and then break it and then get calls that we broke it and then edit the file again on the production server. Um, that was a bit of a crazy one. Objects is another one. When OOP started, or I'm sorry, MVC really started to catch on for us web developers. That was like, okay, okay, this is different. Whereas like before, we always had our I don't know if you remember these. Maybe you might have blocked it out, but remember those init files we used to have. I mean, and it would just be 100 lines of includes, top to bottom, include this, include that, and
Oh yes.
yeah, and also maybe when we started figuring out auto loading, like when Composer started coming around, we were doing it at least at a couple of companies I was working at back then. We used to have our own little hand rolled auto loader things. But once Composer came along and we started getting the I think it was PSR 0 was the first big one with the autoloader, and then we got
Yeah.
PSR 4. But yeah, those were huge. Those like really very it just helps to put some consistency and into the craziness that is web development. So
Mm.
it kind of made us start following rules. Like we all have to do it. If you're going to add in an object somewhere, you better make sure that it auto loads correctly, and PSR4 to the rescue, right? And then with Git, I don't know, and like we should probably talk about this, but I don't know your journey with version control. I started with source safe. I don't know, Microsoft source safe.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, that's good. It was it didn't allow concurrency. And in the sense of you and I both couldn't have the same file open and editing at the same time.
Oh, ew.
Yeah, so you would get things like well, like back in the day when we would edit on production, you'd get that thing of where'd all my changes go, right? Because you download the file, you make your changes, and then you go to lunch, and then meanwhile somebody else downloads the same file, makes their changes, you go upload yours, and now you have a whole big different thing. Source safe was very much that of
Right.
you'd hear throughout the office, who has index.php open, and you have to like, oh, my bad, let me finish up a lot and commit it, and then we're good to go. But it was very much a different thing. And then moved over into CDN, which was nice, but had the same problem. You still could only have one version of it open at any given time. But then we got Git, and
Mm.
Git was like transcendent. And obviously, a whole industry is developed around it, and our entire infrastructure is based around it. And we've gotten offshoots of GitHub where they just really took it and ran with it. And that I think that was probably one of the biggest game changers that I had professionally as a developer. It was like now we can all work on things without having to worry about overwriting everybody's stuff and losing changes and losing work.
Yeah, and I mean, not even just kind of like the professional piece of that, but I mean also the community piece of that, because it allowed things to be, publicly um publicly I could contribute publicly. I think that's the word I'm looking for. So like all of a sudden we're able to kind of all come around like the global campfire, things like GitHub and like Bitbucket and all that kind of thing, and we see this project, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we can all edit these same things. I can create my feature over here. It's not going to get in the way of what you're doing over here.
Mm.
And all of a sudden we're all building the same thing together. So rather than just creating one thing by one person or one team, it's almost creating this global sense of unity around development, keeping that open source community alive in a lot of ways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, feature branches were an unheard of thing. And by the way, just to correct myself, I said CVN, I meant SVN. When
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember SVN.
there you go.
You
Yeah,
know who uses SVN? WordPress.
WordPress. Yeah, no, in fact, I clocked that. In fact, oddly enough, I imagine, I mean, a lot of us probably had these similar stories, but WordPress was really the catalyst for helping me to get into open source development.
Mm.
Was you just write a plugin and then you go through the whole flow of like, I want to get it into the WordPress add-on plugin repository thing, and you got to start using SVN. So now that locks you down into going in there and trying to figure all that out. And but yeah, WordPress is as much as it's easy to vilify. I think that it's due a lot of respect in certain
Oh yeah.
degrees, not in terms of code quality, but in terms of infrastructure. And also to be fair, I had a conversation with a gentleman about this last night. Was It's really unfortunate because the problems with WordPress, when you strip everything else away, it's not even so much WordPress itself as it is just shoddy plugins that don't get updated, that have security holes in them. Like with the WordPress core, to my understanding, doesn't get hacked nearly as often as any of the 300 million plugins that are out there that then expose those vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unfortunate for them, but there's good money in fixing that stuff. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You kind of bring up an interesting idea, this idea behind, there are higher quality products on the market than something like a WordPress, but there's a higher market share for something like a WordPress.
Mm.
Like there's lots of opportunity like that, and especially as like business owners, who may be listening to this, that kind of thing. There's products out on the market like a Squarespace, like a Wix, um, that give me websites, give me products like that in an instant. I don't need to come to a developer. I don't need to worry about all of that, my website being down. What Why would anyone in this day and age work to build like a bespoke website on like a CMS, that kind of thing?
Uh, well, my go-to argument with that, and this is again one of those, like, I was just talking to a guy about this yesterday. Literally, I went to a whole little bit a biz dev thing, and we were all talking about. But that question did come up because the gentleman just got his Shopify sites set up.
Mm,
And he was very, very proud, and it works wonderfully. And I was telling him that's excellent. Like I have clients from time to time where you hear what their needs are, and you're just like, I mean, I'm more than happy to take your money, but I'm gonna really be hurting your business if I do that. Like you should stick with something a little bit smaller. And the criterion I was giving last night, it was all economical. Was initially when you're first starting out, you don't know what you need, right? And so places like Shopify and WordPress, and like they allow you to get up and going very, very easily, and gives you most of what you think you need. But then as your business grows, you want things to work just a little bit differently. You don't like how it does this, or you don't like how it does that. And that's where the bespoke stuff comes in. Of You can't just go up to Shopify and dictate that we now need this specific module that they offer to work in this very specific and nuanced way for your very specific and nuanced business. And the other is cost. Is regardless of feature requirements of I need a system to work in a certain specific way, no matter what, with any of these online ones, you're going to reach a point, hopefully, ideally, if your business succeeds, where it costs more money to stay on the services than it does to just go bespoke. So if I'm going to make up some numbers here, I've been working with Shopify in a good long while, but let's say they take 5% of every sale, right? And 5% is not so bad when if you're making $1,000 a month, 5%, fine, $50. I pay every month to have this thing done. Bargain, money well spent. But if you're
right.
pulling in $1 million a year, that 5% adds up to an incredible amount of money that could just be a one-time cost if you just built it out specific, and developers not going to demand a cut of every single transaction like Shopify does. And their entire business model being predicated on that, of they get a cut of everything. That's
Mm,
not that's not going to scale for business. It's like anything else of like I mean, even going back to the very base of running a business, of I'm leasing space, but now I'm making enough money where I can remove that cost of rent by owning. So why not go and own? And now I have an asset that I own. I have something that I can go ahead and sell, and it adds more value to my business as a whole versus just kicking the can down the road when it comes to using a Shopify.
Mm. How do people know when it's time to make that switch? Because I usually find that that's a pretty it's a fine line, and it's usually, it's like people don't like making change in general.
Hmm.
And especially it's kind of that sunk cost fallacy. I've been with this platform for years.
Right.
I don't, I can put up with the pain. How do you kind of help people see that it's time to make that jump?
Well, if I was to sell it, if I was talking to a client who came to me with this scenario that we're talking about, I'm on Shopify, but now we're making so much money off of it that it's costing us a decent amount of our profit margins. It would be pointing out the control. If they go with a custom built solution, they don't even have to stick with me. They can go elsewhere after the initial build and just hire any Joe Schmo developer out the street to do what it is that they need their system to do. They have that level of control. And then growth. If they decide later on that they want to add in different sections or different technologies or do, I mean, basically whatever they want, they're not stuck with the cookie cutter drag and drop options. I mean, because it really is. It boils down to the lowest common denominator with these website builder things, is all of their features are built out to appeal to the widest range of people. But the majority of businesses don't work off of that. It's like they have their own specific niches, they have their own specific ways of doing it. Like some of them, I mean, even technology stacks where it's great. Shopify has Salesforce integration, but they needed to go to Salesforce and Constant Contact, and then they also need their a daily report emailed out to their head of inventory so that but like it doesn't provide any of that stuff outside the box, and it's just throwing more money into it afterwards. Because I mean, as soon as you start spending a couple $1,000s a month just in fees for hosting your website, that adds up so fast once we get into the yearlies. And especially with the whole idea being that it's going to always increase. Like if the goal is to always make more money. And so let's plan on what are we going to do when we make more money. That you're not going to be able to do that for very long when you're locked into a lowest common denominator cookie cutter type setup.
I gotcha. No, that totally makes a lot of sense. So helping somebody see kind of that, hey, you're going to start losing money. You're getting to that point, and then
Mm-hmm.
helping make that jump is definitely a challenge. So I'm curious because anytime I get in the room with, and I mean this legitimately, like I'm not like kissing up to you. You are legitimately one of the smartest people I know when it comes to these kind of things.
Thank
So one
you.
of the questions I love asking around these kind of things is, what is the nerdiest thing that you're like building right now? What's the thing that's got you excited that you're developing?
Oh man. Okay. Um,
Trade secrets. Everyone listening to this podcast is officially under an NDA as of right now. This is legally binding. Legally binding.
so with okay, this is kind of a long-standing one, but I've decided to start scratching this edge. I don't know exactly the platform. Like it'll for sure be on Expression Engine. It'll for sure be on Craft, but I don't know. And in fact, I'm still on the fence of if this is a good idea or not. For anybody in the Expression Engine world who's in the Slack, about a month ago, I released a very, very basic tech demo. Was all it was, proof of concept, if you will, of a program designed for exporting. So with exporting data, we very much have it very generic, and it's I don't want to say stagnant, but they all work exactly the same, right? I'm gonna use a drop down. I'm gonna configure whatever I want. Give me this specific data, and it does, and it gives it to you. But it gives it to you in a raw format, or if you're lucky, depending on how it's built, it may give it to you in the modular or the intended output. For example, like let's say I'm exporting out a channel entry, and there's a drop down on there with a yes or a no. your export may or may not include N or Y for the yes or no values, but it also may include the yes or the no, depending on, how it's configured, but it's very much a one-to-one or an offshoot, like a crapshoot, I mean, sorry. You don't really know. And they all work in their own way. But they're just not very flexible. And that's something that's like really bothered me. I don't know if anybody remembers, well over 10 years ago, I had the export add-on for Expression Engine. And I was really, really proud of it, but I was still never able to do exactly the things that I'm now trying to do with it. And essentially what this is, this is where the nerd comes in. If I'm not building out an export program so much as I'm building out a uh, a polymorphic object model, essentially where instead of saying this is now like I have to build out individually and sequentially an export for like an Excel file or a CSV file or an XML, everything is driver based. So depending on what you choose, everything is just like, so the way it's set up right now is it's broken up into four main object models of there's your data source. So either entries or members using expression engine parlance or blog posts or, whatever. And you can do a generic SQL one. I just did that for the proof of concept of the object model testing. And then you have your output, the format, and all of these are unrelated. Each one works independent of everything else. You have the output. Are you going to download it? Are you going to save it to a file? Are you going to send it to an FTP server? Are you going to send it to S3? Or like, what are you doing with this export that you just got? And then the fourth one is modifiers. And this is the part I'm really proud of, is the modifiers for the individual data nodes. So for example, I have a thing saying export out all of the data from this specific table. I work in healthcare a lot, so we have to follow HIPAA stuff. So we encrypt everything. Everything is encrypted. And through working with this one specific client, I've built out quite a few export things where it takes it, decrypts it, and gives you the file that you want. But very, very laser focused, very much of like, there's this table. These are the fields that we're going to decrypt, and we're going to save it as an Excel spreadsheet. That's it. That's all it does. With the tool I'm working on now, I get to say, decrypt this column, take this other column and convert the Boolean values, the Y or the N, to one or a zero. But basically, think of it in terms of like field modifiers and expression engine parlance. So there's this data, and I say this specific field, I want it to behave in this specific way, and it does it for the entire export. And then, but because every piece is independent, you can create out new modifiers that are just modifiers. You don't have to worrying about the data format or the source or how it's going to be saved. All you care about is just modifying that one piece of data, and that's true for all of the four components. So if I'm building in something like, let's say I want to do like a grid export, I would just want to take all the data from a grid and export it. I don't need to worry about how it's going to be formatted, and I don't need to worry about how it's going to be served. All I have to worry about is compiling the data and returning it back as an object that the caller expects. So it's all very much isolated. It's all very much compartmentalized, and there is no overlap. There isn't any of we can't do this because of that. It's all very much focused. So I've been playing with that a lot and trying to figure out, is there an ROI on it within, because it's going to take me a good while. Like I've got the base of it sorted out where the key components, all those four layers I just mentioned, all of it works perfectly. But now I need to build out the channel entry stuff, which means building out the grid stuff, which means building out fluid stuff. And all of that, I mean, as somebody who's worked with fluids, I know you have, sir, it's a bit of an investment. And I also, the way that it's coded, it should be platform independent, where I would say 90% of it I wouldn't have to touch if I wanted to port it over to, say, WordPress or Drupal.
Right.
It's all very compartmentalized, and if it works in the Craft one, it'll work in the WordPress one, it'll work in the Joomla one. And but I really want to I want to fix data export, or I want data export to no longer suck. So my idea with this is right now I'm building it out as everything is done through parameters and template tags, which means that I can easily, or well, with a little knuckle or elbow grease, I can build it out as an action where you can just generate out a URL. You click this link and it'll give it to you. But the other side of it was I want to use that for the UI within the control panels. So using Craft as an example, Craft has an action paradigm just like Expression Engine. I imagine WordPress has the same one as well, where it
Hmm.
just generates out a dynamic form in the control panel. And instead of having to worry about views, you're just using this form to determine what your data is going to export. And within the template tags, it's all just hard-coded template tags. But using the actions, it's all just query parameters or post parameters, or however we want to make that happen. But it's still very much a TBD. I'm still working on the idea of it, but I feel like the concept I've proven it to be a sound one. The only thing that really is kind of getting in my way right now is execution time, which is something every export thing has to deal with,
Yeah.
and memory, which is also something every export thing has to deal with.
Every export, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, you hit that like what is it, the N+1 problem or whatever they call it, like
Yeah.
where it's like you're constantly having to loop, and especially because you're like transmogrifying basically pieces of data,
Yeah.
in various different ways. You're kind of hitting that in like boy, there's 10,000 different options there. But like, what a cool way to approach that too, because I mean, you're basically instead of like just providing raw data, you're allowing the data to tell the story that the person wants to be able to like make it tell already without making them throw it in a pivot table or having
Right.
to put it in 10,000 other spreadsheets. So which is
Yeah.
really important. I mean, it's going to save people like 10,000 hours. So
Well, that and it really, the thing that got me really excited about it was it's not just Excel and it's not just XML, it's not just JSON.
right.
And in 2025, the way that the internet's kind of set up is we all have our very own internal data structure. So if I wanted to do an export and have it sent over to Salesforce, we have to then dictate the schema for it and the renaming of the value so that Salesforce knows what to do with it.
Mm.
And with this, you could just write one. And all you have to do is just write out the formatting part. Well, I guess for the Salesforce example, you need a format and an output layer. But just those two things. You don't have to worry about getting the data together. You don't have to worry about compiling it. You don't have to worry, about too much of anything outside of just that one narrow focus piece.
Oh, that's cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
Thanks, man.
I'm excited to see it come to life. So that's awesome. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. So part of what we all do here, besides just getting to know what it is that you're building, is we want to get to know a little bit about you. And so one of the things we do is make sure we always pick a random question from the hat. And so I've got my
Oh
large
no.
spinny wheel here,
Ah,
and so everyone gets so excited about the wheel. I love it. I need to get
no,
a
you
wheel
built
in
a
real life.
wheel, dude. How cool is
Oh,
that?
pickerwheel.com. Not a sponsor, but could be. Um,
Should be.
so so we'll see what happens. Um, oh, we had this question the other day. So, what is the most important thing to you?
Oh, geez. I mean, that's such a loaded question. I mean, wow. What is the most important, like ever?
Yeah, yeah, I guess
Um,
ever. Some of these are like, what food would you take to a deserted island? And some of these are like, where were you on 9/11? So, I mean, there's like almost
oh
no in
God.
between.
Well, I'm glad we didn't get that one. Although I have a really good answer for that one.
Ooh, okay.
Um, what is the most important thing to me? Um, this isn't going to be a very popular answer, but control.
Ooh, say more about that.
So, how can I put this? It involved a little bit of a story, so bear with me. But I came up through the LA entertainment industry and agencies within that. So got to work with a great many great companies and very, very, very smart people working on wonderful things, wonderful projects. And I was able to help them out with their web presence. I saw a lot of I want to say questionable business decisions, but the business decisions were on point, but it didn't at all put any control on us. And by us, I mean the employees. Seeing people show up to work or leave work on a Thursday, excited for what's going to happen on Friday, and as soon as they show up on Friday, giving their pink slip and showing the door. I've seen, or in fact, I've personally given up nights, weekends, holidays. I've been at Christmas in San Diego and had to drop everything to drive back up to LA to press a button because our company wouldn't pay to fix the server or to replace the server. We basically had a server just crashed every single Saturday, no matter what. Couldn't let it run more than 7 days. But then somebody would have to go up there and do it. And so we all took turns, and on the Christmas times, because I was the director of technology at this time, I refused to have my team give up their holidays. So it fell to me to go and do it. And I would drive up, the 2.5 hours up to LA, press a button, and drive the 2.5 hours back down to San Diego to spend time with my family. I've missed funerals and weddings because I love my job so much and I'm trying to help the company. And it was always put out to me of we're a team. This is a joint effort. This is absolutely us against the world. But I've never worked for a single company that wouldn't cut their best employee to save $1.
Mm.
And that really, really stayed with me when I left corporate. When I decided that I was leaving corporate, or well, when it was decided for me that I was leaving corporate.
Big difference there.
Yeah, well, you can only put up with so. I was a pretty bad employee. In fact, now the punchline is basically I'm a terrible employee. Nobody should ever hire me for an employee, but I'm a wonderful contractor, and I can absolutely work on short term. And that was my big takeaway was it's folly. It is complete and total folly for any professional in the 21st century, especially if you work in technology, to trust any company that you're working for. They will not have your back. And I don't mean this in like an I'm jaded way. I mean this it's a bona fide fact. Like Microsoft just posted their highest profits they've ever had, ever in their entire life. Also Alphabet and Google as well. And then they fired 20,000 employees. They're
Mm.
making more money than they ever have before, and they're still trying to make more money on top of it. And they don't care about their employees, not in any way, shape, or form. We are commodities to be chewed up and spit out. And so, control. You need to have control because if you get fired, if you lose a thing, now you're done. And with me, one of the greatest things I realized with going back into contracting, because obviously, I always had this little paradigm of I would work in corporate for a couple years and then I'd go on contract for a couple years and I'd go back to corporate for 5 or 6 years and then I would go and freelance for a couple years. And on the last time where I decided I was just going to go back to freelancing, it was that because when the metal meets the road, if the company's going to save money, they will cut you without a second thought. If they need you to slit somebody's throat, they will demand it and cut yours if you don't do the same, right?
Mm.
But losing a job destroys you. Losing a client leaves you plenty of options still because you have other clients. And
Mm.
having that control and being able to say, no, I'm not going to give up my holidays. No, I'm not going to give up my weekends. And if they want to move on, they can move on because I have other clients and I have other things that are going to take care of me. But I'm not going to give up that control over my destiny. I'm not going to give up that control over my livelihood and making sure that I have food on the table. And like all of us, we have families we have to take care of. And just this idea that I can work for somebody and they can demand the world of me and I can give them the world and I can bend over backwards and I can be Herculean efforts to make sure that everything goes smoothly. But the minute there's a hiccup, that loyalty no longer in the 21st century applies. It also, and I always like to put this as a little asterisk on it, as the growing up in the 80s. I'm 47 years old, came up through the 80s and saw all of the pensions being pilfered, saw all of the news of people losing everything out of pure greed because they trusted a company. And it was always the most bizarre thing. These companies get applauded for destroying people's lives and for laying their employees off for more profit for their shareholders.
Mm.
But they're destroying these people and they just don't care. They expect us to give them everything and they don't give us the same in return. So control. Most important thing to me is control. I need control over my destiny. I need control over my livelihood. I need control over the work that I do. I need to have the control to tell a client, no, I'm not doing that. Like I can think. So one of the first jobs I ever worked for, this is the first time I started thinking like there's something wrong with this world. And this was actually my first job. But I worked for a company. I'm not going to name names because I'm going to write an article about them later talking about it. But
Oh, okay.
it was it, in order to sign up on their website, you had to put in your social security number. You had to put in your entire full name, your social security number, and your address, everything. And all of this was stored in plain text. All of it was served on HTTP. We didn't have HTTPS, although to be in their defense, it wasn't that big of a widespread thing in those days. But just realizing this is wrong. This is really wrong. We shouldn't be storing social security numbers in plain text along with their entire, like we could just steal someone's, if our database gets hacked, every person is going to have their identity stolen.
Mm.
And having the control and the ability to tell my clients, no, I'm not doing that. Even if they try to force it, we'll find someone else. Good. Find somebody else because I'm not that guy. I'm
Right.
not gonna just take your money to screw over all of your customers because you want to be lazy and not spend the $150 a year for an SSL cert or whatever they cost. Actually, it's been a while since I bought one. How much are they? An SSL cert?
SSL certs?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. I use
They're
Let's
free,
Encrypt. They're
right?
free. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. Like Let's Encrypt makes them free. Like now you have zero excuse.
Yeah. So, but back then it was a different time and a bit of a wild west. And
Yeah.
I think even then, I mean, this whole, I think that we were storing it in an access table. I'm not even kidding because it was a VD6 site.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, but just being able to say no and having the control of just like, no, 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 I don't want to do that. Or, I mean, like this ship has sailed, but once upon a time I used to have I don't work in politics and I don't work in religion. And being able to be in a financial position of being able to say, no, 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 I don't work in those fields. Those are just, it's just not for me. I don't want to. That is obviously different now. I'll work in politics. I'll work in porn. I don't care. But once upon a time, when you're young and idealist, you're like, no, I'm not working in politics. So, but being able to have that control to say no, that's important. And I
Mm.
think especially with younger kids nowadays, and I say kids loosely, but it's they don't have as many choices anymore, and it's kind of sad. Um, in fact, when I do a lot of these public things, I'll go to meetups and networking things in Tucson, and that's probably the number one question I get asked is how do I get into contracting? And it breaks my heart to have to tell them every time. It was like, well, work in corporate for a few years and get better. But as soon as they're working in corporate, they're a cog in the machine, and it starts becoming this thing of you're disposable. And it's just at this point, I'm so jaded that I just don't trust. We'll always have your back. You're a liar. Like it's one of those of like anytime anybody says that, it's just like, well, now I know that you're a liar. Like there's no business that is always going to have their employees back, and I just don't see giving up control as being on the table. And in fact, I've even lost jobs because of it, where
Yeah.
somebody wanted me to be, or actually a couple of people, but they wanted me to be a quote unquote employee, but I could still be a 1099, still technically a contractor. But they needed that level of commitment, and it's a hard no for me. I cannot
Right.
be dependent on any one person because when things get tough, and
Oh, totally.
you know,
I mean,
I,
if you think about it, like when our parents were growing up, or when they were working, it was a totally different thing where, companies at least felt somewhat loyal.
mm,
Like I remember hearing the story of my dad, when he was working at a garage and he was a manager or something. He had an employee, who was struggling, and like instead of laying that employee off, he took a pay cut to make sure that his employee could continue to eat. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, that kind of thing just does not happen today.
No.
Now it's like you cut them and like you send them on your way. And a lot of times you're right, like you cut them in order to line your own pockets, which is really
Yeah.
sad. So, wow, I've never thought about like holding that level of autonomy and control like as something as like a real core value. So that's a lot of that's heavy, man. I like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just see some things, and it's funny you bring up the taking the pay cut because in fact that one example I gave where they all got fired on a Friday. That same Friday, they ended up cutting the entire C-suite salary. I was a part of that, and they still laid everybody off. And then the owner of the company shows up in a brand new G-Wagon a couple weeks later. You're just like just the tone
Wow.
deafness of it entirely, where you're like, I'm now making less money. And in fact, when it was pitched, it was like the four of us are going to take a cut so we can keep these employees going. And it was the next day they still fired him. So
Mm,
I don't see the loyalty like our parents used to have. You know,
yeah.
that old school thing of you put in your 20 years, you get your gold watch, and then you've been funding into your pension. Even if you did, like, they're gonna pilfer the pension. They've done it before, they'll do it again. It'll be like a WorldCom situation where, and all the company does is just change their name and they can keep moving on, right? Like WorldCom became MCI, and then MCI became something else, but they're all still long and trucking, and the people who took the money are doing just fine. But like the most vulnerable of their people, the retired ones on a fixed income, this without a second thought, they just destroyed their lives. And we're just supposed to chalk it up to capitalism, which I
Right.
am, uh, not to be mistaken, I am 100% a capitalist, but I don't think I think Bill Burr has a really good joke about this, not to bring comedy into a political discussion. But it is, it's one of those things of like, if you have employees without health benefits, you have employees who can't afford their rent, like maybe not buy a second jet, you know like
Right.
maybe you don't need to have that third helicopter, you don't need to upgrade your boat, right? Like, let's take care of our people. And we just, unfortunately, in 2025, we live in a society where that is lauded. It is, profits above all else. And, it's the most bizarre thing of seeing situations of like full-time employees at Walmart needing to be on food stamps because they can't afford their rent. And they're the ones who are the bad guys, as opposed to just like, well, why doesn't Walmart just not make as much profit? Not no
Mm,
profit, still make profit, but just not as much so that their
mm.
employees can afford food. And yeah, that's the wrong way to look at things. And so I've decided to flip the script and like, no, I'm gonna have a majority of clients where, like, if I lose one, I've got five others. If I lose three, I've got two others. And you can always find new ones. And most of our work is so temporary anyways, that it's
Mm.
it kind of prevents us as developers from really becoming dependent on any one individual client, because the reality is what the reality is.
Right.
But the last thing I would ever want for anybody is that level of coming in and you're handed a pink slip and all of your efforts and sacrifices were for nothing. Were for somebody else's bottom line. And what was that meme? A while ago, Google had laid off a bunch of people and they didn't revoke somebody's Slack access immediately. And his last post before he was let out of the building was, I'm just happy I was able to provide shareholder value. And that just tickles me to no end of like, because it really is of like, that is the virtue within our society, is like it profits above all else. As long as you can
Mm.
provide shareholder value, good for you. And so I choose to have the control to live outside of that.
Wow. We need to do another episode where it's just us talking about the problems with capitalism because I have a feeling this is a short form podcast, but I'm just like, oh, we could definitely go on for this like another 2 hours because I've got some
Yeah.
thoughts.
No, I know. I
So
just looked down. I was like, oh man, we're just trucking
no, no, this
along.
is good. This I'm so glad. I appreciate your answering that so deeply. So good and so important. Wow. So the last question we always end with, everyone's got this question that they've always been burning to be asked. What's the question that you've always wanted somebody to ask you, but you've never been asked?
Hmm. Wow, it's like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't bring myself to say it because it's so. What was it like working with the Call of Duty crew to release Modern Warfare?
Wait, what?
There you go.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah, yeah. This was when I was working in LA in the entertainment industry. I worked at a wonderful company, Streetwise. I was the director of technology there. It's no longer around for what it's worth. I don't know why. To be fair, they were a wonderful company and ran by some very smart people. But yeah, I was immediately involved with the Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare launch. And in fact, we worked on a lot of those video games. We did the Guitar Hero games and um a bunch of movie stuff, but the Call of Duty stuff, I have so many stories about just that build and the lessons learned and the mistakes I made. I made quite a few, but so did everybody else, so I don't feel so bad. But yeah, nobody ever asked me about that. It's on my portfolio, it's on my resume, and everyone is always, yeah, it just kind of gets glossed over.
Wait, you were involved in one of the most important first person shooter games that
Mhm.
has ever existed on planet Earth.
Well, to be clear, I was involved in their web presence for the most important shooter game. Yeah. So and in fact, if I think we may have heard me tell this story in San Diego. We were all kind of getting boozy and hanging out at the Top Gun bar. And it was somebody brought up of the crazy mistakes that were made. And oh, in fact, well, so one of them was we inadvertently crashed Yahoo through just some terrible mistakes on my end. Well, not my end, but it was basically we had no way of anticipating how popular this game would be. Like they told us, everybody told
Right.
us, and we knew Call of Duty. Like it was a bunch of dude programmers. Like we knew Call of Duty, knew it was going to be popular. Had no idea just how popular. Like these are one of so actually I have a couple anecdotes for this or stories if we have the time. But one of them was it was one of the first games that Xbox 360 was doing a public beta for,
Hmm.
where within the 360 you could download the beta of the game and be able to play the beta and give feedback. And I mean nowadays that's such a commonplace thing, but back
Right.
then it was unheard of. Nobody had ever done it, and we were chosen to be the launch pad for it. And so this was back in the day where Flash was a thing. Remember Flash?
Oh, I remember Flash.
Yeah. So we had our creative guy. He created a neat little countdown thing that we were gonna put up on the site that was gonna count down to a very specific thing or a very specific time and then enable access. Well, and keeping in mind, I was director of technology, so this is especially egregious what I'm about to say. I approved using HTML comments to put it up before it was released. So the idea being we're so busy and we're so frantic, we could just have an intern go in and remove the HTML comments and then the thing's live. So this way we wouldn't really have to worry about it going up there. Well, these kids, I don't know if you have ever dealt with like they have no flex. They have no patience, no like as soon as it was announced, they went through every single page and was trying to find clues and file names and conventions that we'd use. The camel casing this or this must mean something. And 99% of them were wrong. One of the kids found the flash thing, ends up posting it up on Reddit or somewhere. And I think actually back then it was Slashdot, where we ended up getting slash dotted. And the entire site just went pretty crazy. That's not the real story. I like that one because it's such a they showed it to me, bro. They showed it to me. Is this cool? And I was like, yeah, excellent. Push it. We'll just undo it as soon as the time comes. But this way we know it looks good. We can go ahead and show a couple people. This is great. Go live. I got paid real money to say that out loud. Subordinate.
Just gonna take down a piece of the internet. No big
Oh,
deal.
this
It's
is fun.
okay.
But no, so with Yahoo, um, we had prepped and planned, man. We went hard. This was back in the day. We hired Rackspace as our server consultants, and they were supposed to set us up a thing. And actually, they did wonderfully. This it wasn't even on them. We just could not anticipate the level of demand. So it ended up being some silly stuff too of like we got the wrong firewall. Like when we were building out our network, we got 100 megabit firewall instead of a gigabit firewall. So traffic was just getting stuck in there. And then we get the gigabit one, but our database replication wasn't able to keep up. So like people would leave a comment and so it wouldn't post right away. So they do it again and again and again and again. And then we're getting called out on Twitter and all this crazy stuff. Well, eventually, when everything did go live, it started out with a server farm of 8 servers. We had 5 web servers purely dedicated. We were even using Lighty as our web server. Apache was much too burdensome. We're going to use Lighty instead. Like this is great. We're a bunch of thinkers over here. We're really solving the problems. And went with Lighty and a 3 database server replication server, where we even did that right of every read went to these two, every write went to this one, and the database replicates just fine. And Activision agreed with us, Infinity Ward agreed with us. This is a perfect setup. Everything's working great. It crashed within seconds of launching. Within seconds of the timer, like go here, sign up, and you can now be a part of the Xbox 360 beta for Call of Duty 4.
Mm.
Crashed immediately. Infinity Ward without just a bunch of a bunch of jerks. They went on Twitter and named names, man. Yeah,
No.
Streetwise let us down. In fact, I should go and see if I can find it. I mean, this is probably from like 2011, 10. I don't know. I don't remember the years too well. But but called us out publicly of we let them down. They're very disappointed. They had much higher expectations. But if anyone who's ever dealt with a DDoS attack, it wasn't even an attack. It was just regular traffic.
Right.
So the only thing that every time that we would add a new server in, everything was so backlogged that server would now get pinged. And so we do another one and that one and that one. And we couldn't stop. So my bright idea, let's just change the DNS to Yahoo. Yahoo can surely take this traffic. We just need it down just enough to clear out the pipes, right? We just need the traffic to be out. So then when you turn it back on, everything flows normally. Yeah, we took down Yahoo, man. It was one of the most stressful nights of my life. I remember the day that it happened, I was getting gas and I was getting phone calls and texts frantically. My office was freaking out. And keep in mind, this must have been at like 7 in the morning when it was just, yeah, it was a very, very fun experience that nobody ever asks me about. And I never get to tell these stories because it's one of those of like, forgive me, but like I sound like an asshole when I talk about those things. Oh, I used to work on Guitar Hero and I used to work on Call of Duty and I used to work with Activision. I used to work with Ubisoft. And the big irony is my portfolio is full of all this stuff. If anyone goes to my portfolio, they'll see all the video game and movie stuff I used to work on, but nobody ever asks me about it.
Right. We need like a whole other episode where we just hear about that, because like the very fact, it feels like that cartoon where like the character's getting shot at and they just take like one of those steel pipes and they bend it back toward the person and like redirect the bullets, and like you just did that to Yahoo and
Yeah.
then took out Yahoo. Like Yahoo, which at the time was like Godzilla.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think this was when Yahoo was still, well, it was still Yahoo. I mean, now it's like a
Yeah.
shell of its former whatever
Oh,
but
it
it
was
was
incredibly
Yahoo.
relevant and just massive, like an incredible amount of traffic. Like, wow. Well, Eric, you became one of the more coolester persons. I don't even know how to say that. Like, I had no idea you work on all of these things, and like, uh, we need to talk more, my friend.
Anytime, man.
Hey, thank you for being a part of this conversation today. So you are definitely one of the coolest people that I know, even more so now that I know you took out Yahoo. Um, we're gonna have more conversations where we talk about what other large technical behemoths you've taken out and possibly what government websites. But thank you for
I
being
have
a
a
part of this
couple.
today.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of government websites? Oh boy, more to talk about. Thanks, man.
This was great. I appreciate it, Doug.